Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Madvertising podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology, marketing, content, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Jenn Pedde. She's a longtime friend of mine. She is VP of Customer Advocacy at PeoplePath, where she brings companies long-term relationship-driven programs with their firmware employees through community strategy and alumni engagement. I think I said all that right. She also teaches social media for communicators as an adjunct professor at Syracuse University's Newhouse School and organizes remote work meetups, combining hands-on community building, teaching, and future of work into a very practical playbook for brands. Jenn, welcome to the show, and thanks for spending the time.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And I feel like getting started, I wrote down a few questions for you, and then I figured we could just talk. But you've built communities across music, ed tech, consulting. You've done all these things. You've lived as an expat. And I guess, do you want to start us off by talking about what do you see as like the through line that connects everything that you've done for all these different types of companies?
Yeah, great question. The through line, I've had such an untraditional career, and part of that has been by design. I never wanted to do anything normal, I guess. I wanted to go do cool things. And so I think the through line through it all has been very innovative technology and cool storytelling opportunities, and people have always been at the heart of it. It's just cool people doing cool things, and I just kind of get attracted to what's new and out there. So yeah, I think that's really the line.
I love that. I'm kind of the same thing. I get really excited about working on cool technologies and cool projects. And I almost find like if I can get excited about it, I can do a good job at it, and like almost nothing else even matters. And of course the people have to be great too. But if the idea is there, then like that carries a lot.
Exactly.
So we're speaking to a lot of advertisers and marketers, and I want to go back in your career just a little bit because you used to work on Oprah's online communities, and obviously that's very exciting for a marketer audience. So do you want to talk a little bit about that experience and maybe some things you learned from that you've maybe applied elsewhere? Because it's kind of a unique thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got my start working in entertainment. So I was booking music, tours, personal appearance. I was at the William Morris agency. And so I think part of that is why I was able to wind up at Oprah, because I'd had that entertainment background. And so working for Oprah is always the first thing people zero in on because it's Oprah, and it was amazing. And so I led a team of community managers and moderators for about 3 years, almost 3 years, at an agency called eModeration, which is now called The Social Element. And so what their focus was largely just moderating all the content that would come in on all of Oprah's social media sites, websites, e-courses, everything that she was doing, which was in the millions, right? So we had to do that for a variety of reasons. But one of the things was just Oprah found it very important to know her audience and to answer questions and build that community. So it was one of the most positive experiences I could have had. And so, yeah, it was about a team of 20-ish moderators, maybe 7 community managers, pretty much 24/7. And when I got handed the account, it was so funny because the woman who had managed her stuff for 20 years only had a text file. It was like 20 pages of a text file, not a Word doc, not a Google spread, nothing. It was just a text file I had to search through. So I really had to build it from scratch. And so it was a lot of moderating the community and the engagement and the questions and the customer service side of it all. So it was really great.
Yeah. And I feel like in terms of internet communities, that one probably is like more wholesome, probably not as many like trolls and like strange people, because you're kind of there for like the book club and for kind of positive things, right?
Yeah, it really renewed my faith in the internet at the time because everybody was really positive and there to share good stories and uplifting stories. The hard part really was she focuses a lot on some medical stuff like advice, which is, not easy to manage. And then a lot of religion. So she had a lot of managing those tough conversations, but all in all, very positive experience. Can't say a bad thing about it, to be honest.
And you've worked with a bunch of different types of companies and organizations. Are there some principles with managing online communities that don't really change across something like Oprah Entertainment and then to something like a B2B SaaS firm?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I work in B2B. I've mostly done that for the most of my career. But I think the things that really do kind of cut across it all is community is all about a sense of belonging. Human beings just want to participate and belong in something. And it can be transactional. People come and go, and it doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter what size. People just want to feel a sense of purpose and connection to other people. And so online tends to bring that together in a way that we no really longer have in our physical. Used to have, your block is everywhere. When you lived in a small community, you had your church and your school and your, neighbors. And now we don't really have much of that because everyone's so on the go. It's all online. And so really creating those spaces online and every opportunity for whatever purpose, the commonality is just connecting people and seeing what can come from it.
I love that. And I think also the consumer stuff, people tend to, a lot of older execs, I think, tend to bracket like, oh, this is to consumer, oh, this is B2B. And on the internet, everything is kind of to consumer. It's not like, it might be multiple people making a decision on something, but still any of the communications online are still to a human. So I think like social media, people really get that, and it really is broken down versus some of the more stodgy marketers like kind of view it different. And ultimately, when you can bring that consumer mindset to B2B, where you're really empathetic, you really listen, I think it's appreciated.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you say that too, because what I've been doing the last 10 years is working with companies on managing their former employees, which sounds like a weird thing at first, but when you start digging into it, the fact that it's great for brand awareness, great for business development, and really great for recruitment and boomeranging people back, what cuts at the heart of all of that is the fact that we did some research to find out why people participate. Why would you want to go work back at your old company, or why would you want to even be involved in helping the brand of an old company? And we did some research with Cornell a bunch of years ago, and it comes down to 4 motivations, which is you're career driven, you're social driven, you're maybe driven by a mission or purpose, or maybe you're just pragmatic and want some discounts. But either way, in a group of people, this is what people are wanting to get the value out of it. So if you give them that value, then you're going to see the business returns on it, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. So let's talk about your current company. So like in thinking of my firm or employers, the only one that has done anything like this is, of course, Google, because they're super well resourced to actually do this. And I think what you're doing at PeoplePath is you're trying to scale what these big companies do really well for everyone. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't even know if Google's is official. I think Google's is actually more made up by the former employees themselves, like a grassroots. So we tend to work with organizations that are sponsoring it themselves. So companies like Accenture, Starbucks, Deloitte, EY, I mean, just companies that are really getting it. A lot of law firms, consulting firms, they really understand the value of creating those relationships over time for business purposes, which is great.
Yeah. And so what you do right now is you sort of processize all of that, and you give companies tools to do messaging and to have events. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So we apply the community building principles as best practices. And my company is a software company, software as a service. And so we work with these companies to then, when an employee leaves, let's say they're using Workday or something, your end date is your last piece of information and data that you get. And so our service then hooks onto something like an HRIS system or a CRM system, so that way you can keep that information going. So you have a work email address that ends on your last day, and then you give them a personal email address and a profile and a place to put all this information, what they're doing now, where they are, what they're interested in, a job board, things like that, a directory, so you can connect with other people who used to work for your company at any point. You give them some valuable tools, and then yes, I help them with strategy and how to connect and message and just keep in touch with those people over time to keep those relationships warm for the purpose of building relationships, business, brand, talent, all that kind of stuff.
And is doing advocacy here for past employees, is that something that matters when you get to a certain size as a company, or is that even something for startups you would want to do?
I do think it's something startups could start to do. I think it's a numbers game. If you've got 10 employees, it probably doesn't work so much. But if you're a startup of a few years old and you've had a lot of turnover and you still want to keep in touch with that talent, I do think it's a valuable tool, especially more mature startups. I mean, they're going towards an IPO or something that are getting really large. It just sets you up for doubling down on great company culture. The more you do with employees, and you know they're going to leave. The average right now, if you're under the age of 35, the average tenure has gone from 2.9 to 2.7 years in the last couple of years. So it's going down. People aren't staying anywhere as long. And at any age, it doesn't matter what it is, it went from 4.1 years to 3.9 years. So no one's staying at a company. And so whether it's a startup, a mid-sized firm, an enterprise firm, everyone is leaving every few years. And so you want to capitalize on what they learn after that. A lot of people come back. That boomerang number is higher than it's ever been. So it's really kind of cool. And it saves companies money. You capitalize on a faster ramp up time. There's so many benefits to it. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I had personally gone through a few different companies in the pandemic period for a number of reasons, but I've been at my current company for 4 years. It'll be like 4 years this year.
Wow.
And it's like great management and great product makes all the difference in the world. Where
100%.
sometimes you join someone's startup and it's a great idea and the people are really nice, but it kind of just doesn't work out. And that's kind of the nature of the beast with a lot of tech things. I actually like that the tech sector is like, because we're definitely driving the number of years that a company's down, especially if you're in startup land. But I love that the tech sector is very forgiving of and understanding of that. Hey, these are ambitious people. Tech startups tend to make big bets. It either works out or fails big, and we're kind of empathetic to people who have had maybe job hopped a bit, where it's seen by a lot of trad organizations as, oh, this person's not loyal. But in certain areas, it's like it kind of makes sense if things are failing fast, or if it's just not right for you because they hired fast. We're more forgiving of it than maybe some other sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can recognize where talent is, right? So it's just show me what you can do. And if it works for a year or 10 years, great. As long as we just kind of keep, like you said, failing fast, I think is really important. But you burn through a lot of people that way too. But just because it didn't work right now, it doesn't mean that it couldn't work 5 years from now. And you have a new idea or a new renewed skill or something that you could bring back to a company.
Yeah, we've had some early employees even come back, which I think is a pretty bullish signal. So you credit many of your career opportunities to staying in touch and building really great relationships. Can you share what does keeping in touch actually look like that you've done to success, and you could advise maybe other young people to learn from?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, because I don't think there's been a more important time than right now to keep those relationships going. And that's why I said to you yesterday, I was so happy that you kind of came out of the woodwork session, because it's been a few years since we even got up and talked together, right? So one of those things is just reaching out and seeing who's around and wants to have a chat. I think you can be more prescriptive about it. You could actually set up a goal for yourself and say, hey, I want to talk to 3 people from my past over the next quarter. And then just kind of create a list, right? And be like, oh, who do I want to reach out to? Who haven't I talked to in a while? It's just kind of thinking about it for half an hour and just writing it down, I think is really the best place to start. Casually looking through LinkedIn or any other social network that you're on, and just try to have a more intentional conversation and just see what's going on and what people are doing. And that's how you learn, right? Like you learn what cool things are going on, what opportunities are available. And that's just the best way to even find a job at this point, if anyone's looking, right? These job boards and online things aren't really working these days.
Yeah, it's I feel very bad for young people now, because you might have to apply to hundreds, maybe even over 1,000 positions before you get a serious callback, or you have enough interviews to get to success. And companies are looking at junior talent and they're like, why wouldn't I use AI for this, or why wouldn't I just get a contractor or whatever? So it is a tough time. And in fact, I have empathy for millennials as well, who kind of graduated into the global financial crisis. And then once things were actually going well, COVID hit. And so kind of none of the young cohorts are really immune to having a lot of chaos in the world. But to your point, I think staying in touch with former bosses, former colleagues, former managers is really important. And I also think it's interesting. Like there's like, even if there's no ROI for you personally, it's interesting to hear their stories. I think it shows that you care, because you genuinely do care about these people, right? Like they're not just people that are in a network for you. These are human beings. And, you know, unless you're completely cold and calculating, and I don't think most people are, like, we like to, you know, have a coffee or a beer with these people when they're in our city too. So I think it's pretty important too.
Yeah, I connected with my CMO of, God, I think 10, 12 years ago, right before the holiday break. And I hadn't talked to him in that whole time. And so he's working on something new, and it's actually something that could benefit me, even though my company couldn't really use it. I was able to provide him some feedback and be like, man, I'd love to use this in the future if you ever kind of need a small business to work with. He was looking for enterprise stuff. But yeah, I think you just never know what comes out of it. And you just take the phone call, you know, it never hurts to catch up. And especially if you're remote or working, you know, in a non-New York or San Francisco location, right? Like you got to work it a little bit harder to connect with people.
For sure. So speaking of giving back, you are also a professor at Syracuse. And so do you want to talk a little bit about how you got involved in that, and maybe encourage some of our other ad and marketing peers if this is something that they should do too? Because I love that you do this.
I love that I do it too. It was one of those things where I'd always wanted to be a professor at some point in my career. I always thought it would be something closer to retirement, but I just got kind of lucky. So in 2013 or so, I had just finished kind of working on one of the largest Twitter chats. It was CMGR chat for community builders with Kelly Lux. And so Kelly was working at Syracuse at the time. I'm a graduate of Syracuse. No one at the time was working on social media pretty much at all in this way that we were. And so they had just asked us to start teaching like a content strategy, social media strategy course as an elective. And this was just kind of the start. And so then over time, they've kind of formalized this master's in communications degree. And so I've been teaching in that ever since. And so the course now is social media for communicators. I am an adjunct, and there's a lead. Actually, people on this podcast may know Nick Cicero, who is currently the lead of the course. And so we work together to kind of build it into what's happening now and relevant stuff. But the degree itself is for anyone who's maybe looking to make a change. And even if you've had a career in communications, but want to learn more innovative things, more storytelling things, multimedia things, it's really been a great bunch of years. And the people I meet are all fascinating. They're all really driven, really ambitious, just want to learn new skills, or they want to break into advertising, PR, marketing in some way. And so what I tell them is kind of all the same, that this is great, get the education, learn the skills, but you have to apply it. And so you have to find a project to get involved in and make a name for yourself and get visible online. And when people do that, I see them really excel in their career during the degree and after. So it's been wonderful to kind of see students, all ages. A lot of my students are even older than me, which is fascinating. So it doesn't matter how old you are, where you are, it's all online. It sounds like a plug for this program, but it's just been so great to like see people really change their lives through it. And so I think there's still a case for traditional education in this way.
Yeah, I would really echo what you said about young people being super ambitious, driven, smart. I gave a talk at the University of Florida, my alma mater, and the advertising students were definitely like way more ambitious than I was. Like we all went out they all took me out for beers after, and they were asking all of the right questions professionally, whereas I think I never would have gone to anything like that as a student. And so I like super white pill for the future that like the young kids are, despite all of the things that they've had to go through. I think the ones that are driven are like so smart. They're like smarter than we are. Great.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so the whole stereotypes of Gen Z and millennials, I have to throw that away. It's just bad journalism, right? But like when you really drill down to it, like the people who know what they want and are motivated and are ambitious are going to be some great hires, and they know it. And that's what sets people apart too.
Yeah. So you've lived abroad, you've worked in startups, you've been inside Fortune 500s. I feel like people with a nice diverse amount of actual work experience see the work environment different than people who've just been at big companies or just been at startups. What do you think shapes your view of the world and work most, because everyone's in such different work environments. And I tend to think I tend to see my startup friends and my corporate friends view the world so differently. And so having been at both, how do you kind of view work and life balance and things like that?
Oh, such a great question. I think it's all over the place right now. And so I think the pandemic was a good thing in the sense of we've had these tools, right? We've had these networking tools for ages, but it really forced people to realize that we could use them and we could live the life we want to live. So I run a remote co-working group here. It's about 1,500 people in San Diego. And it's people who just want to own their lives, right? It's people who really do want to be nomads, or they just want the flexibility, or they have kids or whatever, but they're more productive than they ever were in an office. And that works for them. And then there's people who are in bigger corporations that want the face time. And so they want to go back to office. So I think that flexibility is the biggest thing that a company could offer. But as far as the startup versus corporate, it's really just how you want to spend your life, right? Like, one of the things, my company is small. It's about 65 people worldwide. And I love it for its flexibility and what we're doing and the mission and where we're going and the clients we work with. But it's very difficult to get some things moving when you don't really have a large team or resources or a budget versus you have that at corporations, right? And sometimes you have more people and you have to figure that out. So there's pros and cons to it all. And so I think it really just comes down to personal preference. I like spending my day with not a lot of politics and drama and having to figure out an org chart of 5,000 people. But there are some advantages to having that 5,000 people available to do whatever you need them to do. So it just kind of depends. I go back and forth every few years. I want to be in a big company versus a small company, and I can't figure out which one I want.
Yeah, I had always been a consultant and agency guy, and I went to big tech company for 6 years, which is the longest amount of time I've ever been at a company. Mm-hmm. And I realized a big company was not for me. I was making more money but less happy than I was at the scrappy startup or the consultancy. Some of us don't do well with super rigid hierarchy and a lot of top down. We want to run our own programs. We don't want a million things to report. We want to be trusted to do the right thing. But for other people, that freedom is terrible. And so they're probably better off at a large company, and they like to come in and kind of have that predictability.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with either. It's just, where do you fit in and what works best? And then I think the trouble comes just from managing it, right? As a manager, how do you manage all those different personalities of who wants what? And I do think there's some drawbacks to the remote world. I do think you need some of those water cooler conversations to build some face time with people. So as long as companies build in that time for remote workers to get together a few times a year, whether it's at a conference or offsite or something, as long as you build that in, then you get the benefits of both. And so I think that's the important thing these days.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think breaking bread every quarter in person is more important than the water cooler conversations. And even if you work in person, I'm a big fan of getting together outside of the office too. I think that time is important. So you talk to young people a lot. What do you tell them about if they want to go into, they probably don't necessarily want to go into advocacy for for employees necessarily. They probably want to go into community management, and social media is probably the sexy thing. But what do you tell them about, what that career looks like versus what they probably think, since they use social media tools socially, but they haven't actually worked in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so funny teaching a social media course because people come in thinking it's going to be so easy. Oh, it's just social media. I can do this in my sleep. And the amount of people I've failed over the years because of that mindset is wild, right? And it's not. It's strategy. It's thinking about all the pieces. I think social media people tend to be mini CEOs. You have to be cross-collaborative, cross-functional. You have to know all the parts of the business for content creation and advertising and all those things. So I think it's a harder job than most people think. Now, that being said, there's social media, there's community, and there's advocacy. I kind of thought I made advocacy up a few years ago when I created this title, but I went to a conference, the Alliance puts on these conferences for product and advocacy and all these things. And it was great. And I went in September, and there were dozens of people that have been doing this for a decade or more. And I think it just depends on where you want to be more effective. So in social media, it's a lot of content, it's a lot of calendars, it's a lot of approvals and creativity, and that's great. You have to know a little bit of paid marketing, paid advertising. The organic and the paid are so hand in hand these days, whereas 10 years ago it wasn't. So you have to know marketing and advertising principles. Community is still community, right? It's still about building relationships and trust, and again, more content, but it's a lot of data management. It's a lot of organizing strategy and campaigns and thinking about connectivity to the platform and things you're using. And there's advocacy, which I think bridges both of those things really, really well. Advocacy is about taking the people you have in your community that are happy and thriving and doing the things you want them to do and putting them to work for you. And that's where companies love to hear it. They're like, oh, well, we can do all this, and we can get all these case studies and all these webinar guests and all these things, and that's wonderful, but you don't want to burn those people out either. So it's still got that community of protecting them a bit, but getting all the benefits out of it. And so creating the story that you want so badly. And I think you can see some real great ROI out of the advocacy, more so than community, maybe even more so than social. But all those things go together. If you could do all of those things really, really well, then you've got the foundation and you've got the metrics and you've got the engagement and buy-in, and then you've got the story. So if you could do all those things, it's like a triangle that I think someone needs to create. Maybe I'll create it at some point of how these things work together, but they're not silos. They have to work together.
Yeah, I love that. And I think in particular, like the advocacy stuff for employees is great. And then there's another concentric circle out. Like all of these Silicon Valley companies have developer advocacy ecosystems that bring in, a lot of new people building on their APIs and helps get them, new users onboarded and basically builds out the ecosystems. And like Microsoft, Google, Apple have like big advocacy efforts around that. Yeah. So it certainly is another great, non-paid part of marketing. It of course requires internal team members to wrangle those communities and set up software, but it's all really good marketing. So then that leads into another question that I like to ask social media people is, I feel like for a while, getting social media sold in the enterprise or even community, was like this really hard struggle. And I kind of think in a lot of cases, it's one, right? Like these big companies do have, six-figure senior social media positions. Some, like Duolingo is paying like, 300, 400,000 for their social media director. So it's established as a part of the business, but I've also found it's like this ceiling, unfortunately, and I don't agree with this in the marketing org, where, you're the social media person, even with people who should understand the importance of the internet, it's still seen as a junior level thing. So I guess, what advice do you give for anyone listening to this who works in social, who really wants to elevate the perceived and actual value of what they do within the company?
Oh God, that's such a great question. I am such a metrics person. And so I'm very big on storytelling, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And so if you are really trying to make a name for yourself and carve out social as a very important part, you've got to make friends with the rest of the marketing organization, right? Everyone will always default to brand as kind of the pinnacle of marketing, which sometimes blows my mind, because it's really just, once you set up the brand as a story, it's not the execution of everything else, right? So those executioners are the more important parts of your team. But I do think you have to make friends with the PR department, with the advertising department. All of these things have to come together to create a full marketing picture. And so if you're trying to elevate yourself, I think it's all about that story. What have you accomplished, and what can you accomplish, and what sets you apart from your competitors because you're doing these things on social differently from other people? The Duolingos, the Wendy's, they're setting themselves apart because of their messaging and how they're communicating and what they're letting their teams do. So you have to kind of get out from underneath the approvals and the legal part of it as much as you can, and let a team do what it needs to do to be successful. So I think really it's about making friends, sharing that story, and making sure that your metrics back up the whole thing.
Awesome. So Jenn, our last question, can you plug your company and who should come and talk to you if they're interested in advocacy and why, and give us the pitch so we all know who should give you a call?
Yeah, absolutely. So PeoplePath is the world's leading provider of corporate alumni software. And so we work with companies of all sizes that want to keep in touch with their former employees to build brand awareness, to build business development pipelines to build talent acquisition boomerangs back into the organization and do all of it really well and build a strategy for the organization. And so I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk about former employee relationships, customer advocacy, about how we work with our clients to share their stories broadly, and social media or communication or anything else. I'm always happy to talk to and connect on LinkedIn and just have these conversations and see where things go.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jenn. You've been a wonderful guest. We really appreciate you. And for listeners, we will see you next time with another episode.